It will become more difficult to hold demonstrations in Georgia. Criticizing government officials could lead to imprisonment. On February 6, the Georgian parliament, which has no opposition, passed a series of repressive laws. The document was signed the same day by Mikhail Tbilisi, whose legitimacy as president is not recognized by the Georgian opposition or the European community.
Now protesters face punishment for blocking bridges, railways, highways, tunnels, and certain transportation hubs designated by the municipality. It is also prohibited to participate in a protest that the police have ordered to be stopped. Fines and detention periods have been increased for disobeying or insulting police officers, violating rally rules, and blocking administrative buildings, from a paper Kartuli publication on Telegram.
The Georgian government is moving further away from democratic standards, according to a joint statement by the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, and the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Oliver Varhelyi. Brussels has called on Georgian authorities to suspend the new laws.
The Georgian authorities have resorted to intimidation tactics and violence to silence dissenting voices. We call on the Georgian authorities to release all journalists, activists, and political detainees detained unjustly. We urge the authorities to ensure a dialogue with all political forces and representatives of civil society. From the joint statement by the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, and EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Oliver Varhelyi, on the European Union's official website,
the European Council has also expressed concern over the Georgian government's decision to refuse adjustments to the foreign influence law. In 2024, Georgia's parliament passed the Transparency of Foreign Influence Law, a Russian-style foreign agent law, amid mass protests, opposition criticism, and international backlash. The opposition has warned that Georgia is unavoidably moving toward Russian-style authoritarianism.
The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, PACE, in Strasbourg has passed a special resolution on Georgia. In April, the Georgian delegation's mandate will be suspended if Georgia does not call for new elections. This is a completely new approach in international relations, radically changing everything. For the first time, an international document has explicitly stated that new elections must be held in the country. This means that no one recognizes the results of the elections held last year. The only solution in this situation is new elections.
The level of
democracy is not very high in Georgia, and those public institutions which are supposed to conduct elections, like election administration, the courts and law enforcement institutions, they are supposed to, to conduct elections to react on some kind of violations and, to make sure that the elections and electoral integrity is protected. Unfortunately, because of the lack of independence of these institutions and the lack of integrity, of course, there are significant risks that the elections will be rigged and manipulated in many ways. So that's why the existence of independent, local, and international groups.
Since November 28, mass protests have continued in Georgia. The main cause of the unrest is government's decision to suspend negotiations for EU membership until 2028. Protesters are demanding new parliamentary elections, the resumption of Georgia's EU membership talks, and the release of those detained during the protests. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
Thousands of people from Tbilisi and various Georgian regions, including Samegrelo, Racha and Kutaisi, marched through the capital on December 21st, heading to the parliamentary building. Protesters continue to demand new elections and the release of those detained during previous demonstrations. Georgians began protesting in late October 2024, accusing the government of falsifying parliamentary elections, while allegedly handed victory to the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party. Demonstrations intensified after November 28, when the government abandoned its pursuit of EU integration. The protests first erupted in the spring of 2024, following the introduction and eventual passing of a controversial law on so-called foreign agents. Georgia's partner countries explicitly warned that adopting this Russian-style legislation, which allows civil society organizations and independent media to be labeled as foreign agents, would significantly distance Georgia from the EU. On December 20th, following a visit to Tbilisi, Council of Europe Secretary Secretary General Alan Berse announced that the Georgian government has pledged to amend the contentious law.
I welcome the government assurances to amend the legislation on so-called foreign influence. We will now set up a working group with Georgia and Council of Europe experts, notably the Venice Commission, to identify the changes that will be made.
Meanwhile, Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kabahidze commented on Berset's visit, stated only that the government was open to discussing the law.
We had discussions about the legislation, including the law on transparency of foreign influence. Once again, we have expressed our openness to dialogue. We demonstrated this openness during the law's adoption and afterward. We reiterate, if someone can prove to us there is something negative in this law, of course we are ready to discuss these issues and cooperate with the relevant Council of Europe structures.
The Georgian government has decided to reward officials sanctioned by the West for their role in wildly dispersing protests. Among those recognized are Minister of Internal Affairs Vakhtang Gomelauri and the heads of the Ministry of Internal Affairs Special Tasks Department, accused of orchestrating attacks on opposition politicians, journalists and protesters. The US and the UK recently imposed sanctions on these individuals for human rights violations, while Latvia expanded its list of persona non grata.
I have placed 13 Georgian citizens on Latvia's persona non grata list, banning them from entering Latvia. This decision was taken in accordance with Section 61.2 of the immigration law by Bob Brazier, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, on social network X.
Brussels has also introduced restrictions revoking Georgia's visa-free regime for holders of diplomatic passports.
This means that those currently in power or holding official positions are banned from entering the EU. It is a strong political move and a powerful signal to the Georgian people that this government cannot lead us toward our true Georgian dream, joining the EU and potentially NATO.
By government, Georgi Baramidze referred to the parliament, whose elections are not recognized by a significant part of society, and the opposition, and the newly appointed president Mikhail Kavelashvili, the first head of state chosen not by popular vote, but by an electoral college composed of representatives of the ruling Georgian Dream Party.
The EU did not recognize these elections, EU member states did not acknowledge them, no one congratulated this so-called government on their election, except Azerbaijan, Belarus, Armenia and, for some reason, Serbia. No one else in the world recognized this authority. This government is completely illegitimate.
The so-called inauguration of Kavelashvili is set for December 29th. On that date, current President Salome Zourabishvili will lose her state security detail and likely face attempts to evict her from the presidential residence. Despite this, Zourabishvili has declared that she will not resign and intends to remain in the office until new parliamentary elections are held. Reported by Katerina Bastun, Valeria Nikipelova, UATV News.